Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the AI 2030 show. My name is Xiaochen Zhang, and Executive Director of AI 2030 and also CEO of FinTech for Good. Today we have Nick on our show, and before we dive deep into the topic, and Nick, can you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for having me. My name is Nikhil Pradhan. I'm an intellectual property lawyer with Foley and Lardner. The majority of my practice is helping companies protect their innovations and navigate what their competition is doing, particularly using patent protection. I also do a lot of work helping companies figure out how to understand AI technologies and solutions and how to implement them effectively in their businesses, as well as to protect their innovations around AI. So really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Awesome. And when you talk about all the innovation happening around, and Gen AI based application definitely have tons of interest, from both the employers and also the employees, and a lot of them are now using Gen AI based application to do their job, and then if I'm an employer and all my employees are using different type of Gen AI tools. And what kind of risk are associated with that, and then how can I as an employer to just make sure that all those risks are managed?
Yeah, I think that a good starting point is just to, I think data is going to be a common theme to be thinking about through all of these questions, both from the perspective of what data does the model already have in it based on its training, as well as what kind of data do your employees and users in the company want to be providing to the model. And then I think the other aspect to keep in mind is, having kind of a big picture strategy and principles around how you want your teams to be using these tools. So that might mean, making sure that you're focused on accuracy of outputs, to the extent that you might be using your customers' data or, in the healthcare space, patient data in the way that you're using tools, making sure that you're, protecting that properly and maintaining the trust that, those people have given to you for using this information, as well as to make sure that you're kind of managing any risks associated with bias when it comes to models that might be trained on one, subset of data in the world, but might not necessarily map well to, the person for which you're implementing these tools. So starting from that point, I think one thing to try to do is help your teams get onboarded onto commercially provided systems, because at least right now, those tend to have pretty good protections for data when the models are used, right? So, typically they'll say, we don't own any inputs that you're providing to us. We don't own any of the outputs. And so that kind of creates, at least at, the runtime phase, one level of security where, okay, even if our users are putting information that might have, business value or other kind of like confidentiality or value, we know that the model is not going to retain that. Similarly, if they use the model and come up with some sort of, innovative solution, some sort of new technology, you can kind of rest more assured that whatever outputs that are derived from the model will be retained by your company and your users, rather than being used by the model to update itself or, in a way that might be exposed to other users from other enterprises. And then again, kind of the other thing to think about is, understanding what was really used to train these models, right? So there's kind of a lot of different cases going on right now, trying to answer these questions about, like the New York Times case, for example, when they're going after OpenAI and saying, hey, you took a bunch of our articles and now you're exposing outputs that look a lot like, if not identical to, what our writers created. And so just having some kind of awareness of, okay, if this model was trained with information that might belong to someone else, and then that shows up in the way that, your company is using the outputs when they're using it, just being aware that other people might have ownership over those outputs that you're receiving from the model. Another example there might be, let's say your team wants to use some sort of like automatic code generator, reminding them that even if the model itself seems to be creating, new useful code from scratch, it's been trained on, all kinds of different code that might have been provided, through the internet to various databases. And, that code might have open source obligations on it. It might have bugs or other, errors or security concerns. And so even if it seems like a really valuable tool to quickly, stand up specific functions, help speed up the development process, your team should be aware that, what they're getting might have some risk factors embedded right into it, and, be careful when they actually implement it, that they're, checking maybe if it looks like something that's already out there, or, running the standard kind of bug testing and everything that they would do otherwise.
Thank you. And definitely, as what you can just you have shared, that there are tons of different type of risks out there. And when you talk to your clients, so far that where are the gaps? And it's more as if again that's you don't want to just exposed to the risk, and then to the extent that it's not manageable. So for them, that the gap is more as they don't have the bigger picture, or they don't have the checklist to ask the right question, or it's they don't have the human capital, or or they don't have the tooling. So where are the main gaps you have seen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a part of the gap is that, within any given enterprise, there are a lot of people who have different like small views of why this technology is valuable. So, some teams want to use it because they know it'll help them, create the output, the work product that their roles need much more efficiently, save them time, help them kind of take on more and develop more. But they might not necessarily be thinking through in terms of the big picture, like, for my company as a whole, how am I supposed to be, you know, implementing this tool effectively? Keeping those principles in mind, from transparency to trust and accuracy and managing bias. On the other hand, there might be higher level leaders who know at a strategic level, okay, it's important for us, you know, for marketing purposes, for external credentialing, as well as business purposes internally, to be implementing AI tools somehow, but we're not sure exactly what that looks like, or what's the good way to do it and what's not. So I think the simple answer to your question is there's a bit of a knowledge gap in different areas where everyone wants to use these things, but there isn't any single person necessarily who has kind of a complete view of what that looks like. And so, I think part of the solution there is just having open dialogues from between different teams about, what they're trying to achieve, and what are the implications of using these tools in different ways. And then kind of keeping in mind the company's overall principles for why this technology could be valuable, when they have these conversations, so everything kind of stays consistent with the overall goals.
Awesome. Yeah. And if I understand it correctly, create a culture and also empower your teams. I think, those are the key message where that's where you can just try, as a company or organization, that this can be addressed, in a more systematic way, rather than just no matter you are junior or senior in your company, and then there are gaps. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a perfect encapsulation.
Perfect. And when again, this you mentioned about just when you use it, and then try to use those which already are like commercial apps, where all those potential risks are being managed as that during the procurement process. And there, that's maybe you can further explain to us that when a company enter into a agreement, with a service provider on, Gen AI, what make this kind of procurement different from other type of corporate procurement, and what are the key points that, those procurement specialists need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think on the first part of the question, what makes things different? I think part of it is that a lot of this is so new that you know new ways of using it are arising all the time, and so things that with more mature technologies, people have already worked through some of the implications and have seen how things play out. Um, there's just there's a better understanding in the market of, okay, if I'm using a cloud service, I know where my data resides. I know if I have like export control issues with you know sensitive information, I can try to negotiate for making sure that all my data stays in the country that it needs to, right? um Whereas I think with even though AI has been around for a very long time, with generative AI, there's both a broader group of people who are using it already, even just in the last year and a half or so. Um, and I think also more implications in terms of um, you know what data has been used to train these models, and that might be a bit opaque to the end user or to the company procuring the technology. And so I think that again, kind of starting with the data point, really leads to figuring out, okay, when I'm looking at negotiating for purchasing or licensing an AI tool, I need to track the data both for how the model was trained, as well as at runtime when my users are using it. Um, so if we take, for example, like in the healthcare context, let's say a healthcare provider is, licensing a tool that helps them come up with recommendations for, here's a treatment that we should be giving to a given patient based on information we've, collected about the patient, so that their physicians can kind of make better recommendations about what next steps are. Um, so, starting with the data and then looking at the agreement, thinking about, okay, um, our physicians are going to be providing sensitive personal information about the patients into the model. There should be clear statements in the agreements that nothing that is being provided, at least about patients, if not more generally, can be retained by the model or by kind of any other functions that go along with it. And then again, more on the data side, thinking about bias considerations. So, um, you know, ideally, there's a way to kind of understand when the model generates its outputs. It should have sufficient transparency to tell you, okay, um, here's information that was used to support the conclusion about what kind of recommendation for therapy to give to some patient. Here's information about the distribution of existing information that was used to then train up the model and help it get to that recommendation. So then the physician can look at that and make a comparison and validate, okay, this makes sense. We haven't inadvertently provided some recommendation that's based on one population segment that doesn't actually reflect the person that I'm trying to treat here. And then continuing from there, thinking about okay, if things go wrong, whose responsibility is it to handle any liability that comes out of that? So um, you know typically what you'll already see is that if if the users are kind of using models in a way that complies with their basic terms, so not trying to jailbreak things, not trying to push the edges of what the model can do or should be doing. Typically the model provider will say, we'll have indemnification, so we'll take on the risk if something goes wrong. and they might even say things like, especially if the user puts like risk mitigation into their prompt. So, if they say things like, please, you know, provide me like the most accurate answer, or provide me the answer that you determined with the highest confidence. You might see those in the agreements, or you might ask for them in the agreements if you're the technology provider, um, because you know, at that point, like you want to point out that, if the person buying the technology from you, assume they use it properly, it makes sense that like, you would be taking on um, liability if things go wrong. The flip side of that being, they might say if you enter prompts that go against the terms that we've set out, then you're responsible for what happens with those outputs, um, rather than us as the technology provider. Um, I think another important thing that might still be, for the future rather than currently existing, but if you think about like, again, kind of in the healthcare context, um, any given physician using this type of tool might not have that global view of, okay, what are the outputs looking like for like all the people in my practice or across like our entire healthcare system, and do I have a good sense if the recommendations it's giving, um, you know make medical sense, are appropriate to the populations that we're using them for. They might only have that view of the patients that they're working with, and so having kind of like a higher level user in the loop who can evaluate all of the outputs that are coming out and kind of consider bias and accuracy at a more global level. I think that would be something that would be really helpful for companies to consider, so that it's not necessarily the responsibility of each end user to be doing all these bias and accuracy checks every single time that they run the model, but there's someone with a specific role who can help them um, you know manage that more comprehensively.
Thank you. And obviously, as what you mentioned, that's there are tons of potential new risks where that's a typical IT or application procurement may not involve, and it may just you know try really change your relationship with your customers, change your relationship with your regulators, and that definitely I think is a lot more complicated than the other type of application procurement. So maybe in the future we can just working on responsible procurement related workshop or something to help those folks in the future to understand what are the new new elements which are introducing into that. And of course that that also changed some the nature of the procurement specialist job, where that's you need to really just address tons of new things which are you probably have not been thinking of in the past no matter how many years you're doing it, and then you thought that you have all the skill set needed to do it in the right way. But now that with the AI procurement, it's really a new game. And related to that, I want to just ask you another question, and which is around the IP protection. And of course, that's one uh, excitement, for the enterprise, no matter big or small, to use AI is to trying to just enhance their power in innovation. And there, that's naturally that's again because of Gen AI is very different from any other type of foundational infrastructure to enable innovation, where that's there are you really just bring in a new element which can just have a lot of consequence implication, which is a lot more sophisticated or complex compared with the other application or foundational infrastructure you brought into the system in the past. So IP is one of the key thing within the Gen AI related innovation, where that naturally when you want to leverage Gen AI, you need to put your data, you need to put your idea, you need to put your IP into a platform where that's highly possible, others are able to access to it. So how when you are innovating with Gen AI, how do you protect your IP?
Yeah, great question. So on that specific point you raised about, you know, putting your confidential information, your innovations into models, I think that's something that, kind of going back to what we've already talked about, it just really requires coaching on, I guess, avoiding that as much as possible, or making sure that you're doing it with models where that you have agreements that your data is not going to be used by the model. In terms of protecting innovations that are being developed in this space, um, you know, typically the two most useful tools that will come up are patent protection and trade secret protection. Um, and at high level, what patent protection gives you is the ability to prevent others from doing something that you've claimed, um, and which you've shown is new relative to what else is out there. Um, and it's also limited to a 20-year term basically, and so it's kind of um, you get 20 years of preventing other people from being able to do something, in exchange for, by making your patent public, teaching the world about the innovation that you've come up with. Um, so typically we'll find that patent protection is valuable for, kind of high level functions and structures that explain, um, you know, a solution to some sort of technology problem, and that show what the performance benefit of that is. I'll circle back to that, but on the flip side, trade secret protection is a way for you to ensure that if your confidential information somehow is, stolen, misappropriated, that you can kind of go after, um, the person that kind of took it away from you. So typically what you'll see is, especially in like the AI software context, people might establish trade secret protection around more kind of low level, specific ways of implementing things, that, just looking at their product, someone might never actually be able to know if that's how it works, but it still has business value to you to, deploy something in a specific way, use a particular, software architecture, and so on. Um, so, in terms of patent protection, I'm sure you see all the time people say, um, you know, data is our moat, and I think the patent protection gives you kind of another pillar in building up that moat, both for companies that are, developing fundamental AI technologies, as well as for those that are, taking, maybe to some extent taking what's out there, but then tweaking, fine tuning, using it to solve a specific business problem that their company has or that their customers have. Um, in both those cases, it's really valuable to think about, what exactly is the problem that's being solved, and especially if you can cast that in terms of a technology problem. So, you know, are you using, or your customers asking for you to use AI because they want things to be, things to be faster, to have quicker turnaround times, use less network information, anything like that. These kinds of like specific computer technology problems. And then from there, kind of building to explain, okay, this is why we need to use this type of model or this type of machine learning architecture, to solve those problems. Um, and kind of similarly for companies that are, deploying off-the-shelf AI solutions, understanding, okay, why is it important to use a language model in this case, right? Again, are you relying on it to get kind of more accurate information? Are you doing it in a way that kind of, speeds things up or reduces, um, inaccuracies or lets you, access data that you or make use of data that you couldn't before. So, a lot of companies now are turning to language models because they have, they have this wealth of unstructured data, whether it's reports or, clinical notes, anything like that. And they can use the language models to figure out insights from those and then kind of level up the advantages they're able to provide to their customers and users.
Yep. Thank you. And I think, we have a very clear picture that, all these very important questions which are raising, with Gen AI. And uh, definitely, I think, there are a lot of space where that we can continue the conversation and then to broaden it and also provide a lot of very concrete guidance how that can be addressed. So this is just, such an exciting topic. And I'm looking forward to just have a further conversation and then to just, dive deeper into, all the aspects we have talked about. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it was great talking this through with you. I think I agree that things are just getting started, and all the innovation out there is going to be very exciting. So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with you as well.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who joined us, and listen to the recording in the future. And yeah, we are looking forward to continue conversation with Nikki and dive into procurement, and also Gen AI related innovation related challenge in the future with you. And thank you for your time.